Thank you for the introduction. As being introduced, I am the Chief Sustainable Finance Officer of Financial Services Agency of Japan. Financial Services Agency of Japan is the supervisory body of the banks and insurance companies, capital markets in Japan. So, financial supervisor is invited to speak for the IAMC. So, I would say that this shows how the world has changed in terms of addressing the climate issues. Well, I'm going to talk about the scenario analysis in assessing financial impacts on businesses and the financial sector in terms of climate change. Today, the businesses and financials and also central bankers and the supervisors like me have an increasing interest in scenario analysis, climate-related scenario analysis to assess that impact. And so I'm going to talk about why it is so and how the IAMC can assist businesses, financial and central bankers and supervisors to improve their climate-related scenario analysis capabilities. Well, I believe that many of you are already aware that in the financial sector, an epoch-making speech was made by the Mark Carney, governor of Bank of England, and then chair of the Financial Stability Board. And he warned that most actors do not take into account the impacts of climate change in businesses and investment decision, because such impacts will be felt beyond the traditional time horizons of most actors. So this is the tragedy of the horizon. So it shows that we vaguely know how disruptive technological changes and government climate policies will impact profits and valuation of corporations. Also, we vaguely know that how extreme weather events and changing climate conditions will lower asset values and productivity. So we need more data, information, and tools to assess that. Well, I forgot deleting the animation, which is necessary. But anyway, this is why the TCFD, Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, developed a disclosure framework for climate-related risks and opportunities, focusing on transition risks and physical risks. Well, interestingly, if physical risks are mitigated, there could be more transition risks. And in cases transition risks would not materialize so much, there could be more physical risks. So this means whatever pathways we take, we will face some form of climate-related risks. So the assessment of climate-related risks must address this sort of inescapability of certain risks. And as this chart shows, in the process of achieving the below 2 degrees Celsius goal, the trajectory of emission reduction could pose a significant risk to the business sector and the financial sector, because it will certainly require significant business transformation. But at the same time, we are still not sure whether we could achieve that goal, and in the worst case scenarios, we may face up to very catastrophic consequences of climate change. Sorry. Okay, so this is why the TCFD disclosure framework encourages the use of scenario analysis in describing the resilience of the business strategy. So that is C part of the strategy. But after 2 years passed since the publication of the TCFD recommendation in 2017, the implementation of TCFD aligned disclosure are somehow stalled in the area of scenario analysis so far. You can see the very low rate of the adoption of the recommendation. It's at 6%, 7%, 9%. Businesses and financials complain about lack of standard scenarios and assumptions, and also the complexity in doing scenario analysis and also the cost associated with it. And so in the recent status report, the TCFD identified the challenges related to the use of climate-related scenario analysis. Those include, first, lack of business relevant data and tools, and second, difficulty determining the business-oriented scenarios, and third, difficulties quantifying the climate-related risks and opportunities. And so even if we take some leading examples of the scenario analysis, there's no consensus which scenario should be used in terms of temperature outcome. Also, there's no consistency in assumptions underlying their scenarios. And also, how such scenario analysis can be translated into financial terms also differs among those leading examples. So overall, businesses and financial efforts are so far very much preliminary and require further work. Well, this is a non-exhaustive list of currently available tools to assess the transition risks. And it is hard to summarize some common features among them, but the following aspects can be pointed out. First, most of them are reliant on the International Energy Agency's World Energy Outlook scenario, which attracts some criticism, as you know. Second, most of them are not explicitly linked with physical risk analysis. So the transition risk and physical risk are kind of separated. And third, another analytical tool that can assess transition risks in any company in every industrial sector are very much limited, and a few doing that looks at carbon price and its impact on the valuation of companies. So it's a very broad assessment of how transition risk materialize. Also, in terms of physical risk, this is also the non-exhaustive list of currently available tools. And their limitation can be summarized in one word. That is, there's no analytical tool that can assess every type of physical risk. Well, there's acute risk, wildfire, heat wave, drought, coastal flooding, and hurricane, typhoon, or a chronic risk like temperature rise, sea level rise, and precipitation pattern change. But there's no single model to assess that. Well, it is not only businesses and financials that urgently need a scenario analysis toolkit. Central bankers and supervisors as well. And network for greening the financial system, or NGFS, is a coalition of the willing among central banks and supervisors to tackle climate-related financial risks. And they recognize climate-related risks are a source of financial risks, and thus recommends integrating climate-related risks into financial stability monitoring and micro-supervision. And in this light, they also recommend bridging the gap that currently exists in endeavoring such financial analysis of climate-related risks. Well, the channels through which physical risk drivers impact the financial system are twofold. One is direct transmission channels, including lower property value, lower household wealth, and lower corporate profitability, and increased litigation. Another is indirect transmission channels, this one, which represent wider economic deterioration, including lower demand, lower productivity and output. And also there are financial contagion channels through which the disruptions in the financial system feed back to the economy, creating second round effects. Largely the same can be said for the transition risks. And so the NGFS is currently making enormous efforts in designing a scenario analysis framework for climate-related financial risks stress testing. And for this purpose, they have so far agreed on the possible 4 scenarios defined by transition pathway and strengths of response to mitigate climate change. But while the NGFS members agree on this conceptual framework, actually implementing scenario analysis still encounters a lot of challenges. I will skip this slide. Well, there are some estimates for physical impacts on the macroeconomy, and some estimates for transition impacts on the macroeconomy, and some estimates on sectoral impacts in different 1.5 degrees Celsius scenarios. But in using those estimates in scenario analysis, there are some limitations, especially around consistency in key assumptions and uncertainties. Well, such as the future of climate policy, rate of progress in carbon neutral technology, feedback loops within the model, level of adaptation and adaptive capacity, and non-linear impacts and uncertainties in climate modeling. Also, in getting a full grasp of climate change macroeconomic impacts, there are some evidence gaps, such as the, well, theoretical models include the different transmission channels, quantitative evidence on the impact on GDP components, or quantitative evidence on migration and TFP impacts, and quantitative evidence on impact of climate policy on investment, jobs, productivity, and quantitative evidence on the impact of low carbon transition on GDP growth. And also there are some evidence gaps in terms of the climate changes impacts on financial stability. Well, that includes for physical risks, extreme weather, physical impacts of accelerated climate change or tipping point, or short-term extreme weather, physical impacts and channels for financial stability risks. Also, for short-term physical impacts of the global gradual warming, and also the medium to long-term gradual warming implication for particular sectors. For transition risks, well, there is a stranded asset under 1.5 degrees Celsius scenario, also granular definition of plausible disruptive transition scenarios and the financial implication, and transmission channels and feedback loops that could create systemic risk. So there is many uncertainties and gaps which needs to be filled to endeavor in scenario analysis. So in concluding my remarks, well, I would like to call for more collaborations among climate scientists, macroeconomists, industry sector experts, and financial experts. And we need to know more about how climate risk drivers will affect the macroeconomy and the financial system. And in order to do so, we need to agree on what should be plausible assumption in some key elements, as I described, and must fill the evidence gaps urgently. And while representing the financial community broadly, I very much look forward to collaborating with the IAMC for enhancing scenario analysis capability in the business and financial communities going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have 5 minutes for the questions and comments. Please, in the back.
I'm Shinichiro Fujimori from Kyoto University. Thank you very much. It's a really meaningful presentation for this community. I have two questions to you. One is about the Japanese uniqueness regarding this TCFD. And I've heard some activities in US and Europe, UK, but I have really had a chance to get in touch with Japanese TCFD activities. And do you have any special features in Japanese TCFD activities compared to other countries? That's the first question. The second one is you pointed out that IEA scenarios are standardized for the future scenario analysis, but there are some disadvantages using the IEA scenarios. And could you specify some indicators or information that you really need but so far missing, or something troubles in IEA scenarios that might be addressed by our community? So, thank you.
Well, on the first question, the uniqueness of the TCFD implementation in Japan is there's certain public-private partnership in implementing that TCFD recommendation. So, that is also called consortium, like this one, IAMC. The TCFD consortium was formed to facilitate the discussion between the institutional investors and financial institutions and the business corporation to incorporate TCFD recommendation into the corporate disclosure, and also the constructive dialogue between the investors and the business corporation. So probably that is the most unique feature of the TCFD implementation in Japan. The question regarding the IEA scenario and what is lacking there, in most cases, it comes down to the how they project the growth of the renewable energy. That is where the criticism focusing on. Because at the end of the day, that the IEA's World Energy Outlook gathers the intelligence from the member nations and member governments. So some would say that there is a certain bias towards the existing fossil fuel energy source. Probably we need a more objective scenario. And also if it's not related with energy consumption, for example, steel production or cement production, which is also consumes energy, but it emits carbon in another way than producing energy. So for analyzing those sectors, we need more granular scenarios which can be used for such sectors.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, Elmar Kriegler, Potsdam Institute. So I think that was a very useful presentation, and we have the scientific working group on scenarios for climate-related financial issues in the IMC, where we will have a session also on Wednesday. And I think it's exactly relating to the topics you have raised. And the key question for this SWG is how to best connect to the finance community, which has many different actors. They are the regulators, and then there are private actors, there are asset funds, banks, and these kind of things. And that's a bit we are struggling with, how to kind of find the right connections. We are connected to the NGFS, but the key question is, the information we can provide is something that will come in on the macro level. And we are not experts in financial analysis, so we need to connect in a meaningful way to financial experts that could then break it down to finance risk. Exactly the transition you have shown between the transition and physical risk to the finance risk. And so, yeah, I would like to hear your ideas about this, if I may call it, handshake between our community and the finance community.
Well, I am aware that you're working with the NGFS and also that the Japan FSA is a member of the NGFS. So that is a very good entry point for collaboration. Also, the TCFD, Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, also working on issuing certain guidance around scenario analysis. So maybe TCFD is another channel that you can collaborate with. But at the end of the day, that from the financial supervisor's perspective, that we would like to use that scenario analysis as a stress testing for the financial stability. And in order to do that, we need to connect that your modeling with our modeling. And how to connect together is a very big challenge, because we need a certain coordination among, on the data points that would smoothly connect those two models. So it requires certain technical discussion, but NGFS now envisage that certain issuing certain guidance around stress testing and work further close with you. So I hope that that collaboration can find a certain way forward to solve the issues we are facing right now. So.
Thank you very much.